All right, so get this. Today, we are diving deep into something most people have probably never even heard of.
Oh, yeah.
Inflammasomes.
They are pretty obscure.
But super important, believe me, for our immune systems.
Yeah, these tiny players are much mightier than their name might suggest.
Right. Definitely not a household name.
Not yet, at least.
But that's what we're here for, right?
Absolutely.
To shine a light on these hidden heroes.
It's like we're going undercover to uncover their secrets.
I like that. Going undercover.
We've got this really cool article from Assay Genie, a scientific resource website.
Okay.
It's called Inflammasome Activation Pathways, a comprehensive overview.
Yeah, a little jargony, but we'll break it down.
Yeah, we'll make sure it all makes sense.
By the end of this deep dive, you'll be an inflammasome expert.
You'll know what they are, why they matter so much.
And what happens when they go wrong, which, trust me, is important.
It's like, imagine little guard posts inside your cells, always on the lookout for trouble.
Okay, our cell's personal security team.
Exactly, that's what inflammasomes are.
That's a pretty cool way to think about it.
Right.
So they're like constantly scanning for threats?
Yeah, and they can detect all sorts of things, like invading bacteria or even signs of damage within our own cells.
So not just outside invaders, but also internal issues.
Exactly, they're like a multi-purpose security system.
Very cool. So how do they actually work? I mean, what are we talking about here physically?
Well, they're clusters of proteins,
Okay.
and they act like these little alarm systems.
So kind of like a smoke detector.
Yeah, a smoke detector that can sniff out both a fire and a broken pipe, you know?
All right, that's a good analogy.
Right.
I get.
So there are different types of inflammasomes, just like you have different types of smoke detectors for different threats.
Okay, makes sense.
This article focuses on three main ones:
Hit me with it.
NLRP3, AIM2, and NLRC4.
Okay, so it's like our cells have a whole team of specialized inflammasome detectives, each with their own expertise.
Exactly.
Tell me about them. Who are these inflammasome detectives?
Okay, so first we've got NLRP3. This one's like the veteran of the group, the one who's seen it all.
Seasoned pro.
Yeah, NLRP3 can respond to a huge range of threats, from bacterial toxins to things like ATP and uric acid crystals.
Hold on, uric acid crystals.
You got it.
Aren't those the things that cause gout?
That's right, gout is no joke, and NLRP3 is right on the case.
Wow, so this NLRP3 is always on high alert, huh?
Pretty much, but it doesn't just jump into action right away.
Okay, so there's a process.
Yeah, it's a two-step process, actually.
Walk me through it.
First, there's something called priming. Think of it like getting the guard post ready for action. The cell increases the amount of NLRP3 available, making sure there are enough guards on duty.
Okay, prepping the troops, got it. And then what?
Then something triggers the actual activation of NLRP3. That's when the alarm bells really start ringing.
So what kind of things can set off that alarm?
Well, lots of things. It could be something like a sudden rush of potassium out of the cell, or maybe some of the cell's internal compartments, called lysosomes, burst open. It could even be those pesky reactive oxygen species, those unstable molecules that can damage cells.
Right, those little troublemakers.
Yeah, any of these events can cause NLRP3 to assemble into its active form, and that's when it really gets to work.
Fascinating stuff.
It is.
Okay, so that's NLRP3, our veteran inflammasome.
Right.
What about the other detectives on the team? Who's next?
Next up, we've got AIM2.
Okay, what's AIM2's specialty?
This one is obsessed with DNA.
DNA, like our genetic code.
Yes, but not just any DNA. AIM2 is specifically looking for DNA that's in the wrong place, floating around inside the cell where it shouldn't be.
Huh. Why would DNA be out of place like that?
That's what AIM2 is trying to figure out. It's often a sign that a virus or bacteria has invaded.
So it's like finding a stranger's fingerprints at a crime scene.
Exactly.
A clue that something's not right.
Right, and when AIM2 finds that rogue DNA, it knows there's trouble.
And it triggers the alarm.
Exactly, the inflammasome response kicks in to fight off the infection.
All right, we've got the veteran and the forensic investigator. Who's the last member of our inflammasome detective squad?
That would be NLRC4.
NLRC4. All right, tell me about this one.
This one is a bit of a specialist, particularly good at recognizing parts of bacteria.
So while the other inflammasomes are more generalists, NLRC4 is focused on a specific type of threat,
Exactly.
like a bacteria whisperer.
You could say that.
So what kind of bacterial clues is NLRC4 looking for?
Well, one of its specialties is recognizing something called a bacterial flagellum.
A flagellum.
Yeah, picture a tiny little flag waving around.
Okay, I could see that.
It's basically a whip-like tail that bacteria use to move around.
So it's like a tiny outboard motor for bacteria.
Perfect analogy.
And NLRC4 can spot these flagellas. which helps it identify certain types of bacteria.
Right on.
Clever.
Isn't it?
Anything else this bacteria expert is on the lookout for?
Oh, yeah. It's also trained to spot components of what's called the bacterial type 3 secretion system.
Whoa, that sounds complicated.
It is a bit technical, but think of it this way.
Okay.
Bacteria use this system to inject toxins into cells, kind of like a tiny syringe. So NLRC4 is essentially looking for their weapons.
Wow, so our cells have this whole security team in place.
They do.
Each inflammasome with its own specialty and way of detecting threats. That's amazing.
It is incredible how our bodies work.
But what happens once they spot these threats? What do they actually do about it?
That's where things get really interesting. We'll have to save that for part 2.
Oh, come on. Now you got me on the edge of my seat.
You'll have to stay tuned to find out what happens next.
All right, fine. I guess I can wait.
It'll be worth it.
I hope so, but seriously, this is fascinating stuff.
I know, right? These inflammasomes are tiny but mighty.
They really are. Can't wait to dive deeper in part 2.
Me too. I'm excited to share more about these amazing little defenders.
All right, everyone, make sure to come back for part 2, where we'll uncover what happens when these inflammasomes spring into action.
It's gonna be epic.
It better be. Okay, we're back, ready to dive back into the world of inflammasomes.
Ready when you are.
Last time, we got acquainted with our team of cellular detectives, NLRP3, AIM2, and NLRC4.
Right, each one with its own special way of sniffing out danger.
But we left off on a bit of a cliffhanger.
A little bit.
What happens once these inflammasomes sound the alarm? What do they actually do?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
Each of those inflammasomes might have its own way of spotting trouble, but they all ultimately use the same way to communicate.
Interesting, like a common language.
Exactly.
So what is it? What's the inflammasome language?
They activate an enzyme called caspase-1.
Caspase-1.
Yep, that's our guy.
Okay, I'm guessing this is where things get really interesting.
Oh, you bet.
What does this caspase-1 do?
Well, imagine it like this caspase-1 is a pair of molecular scissors.
Molecular scissors.
Yep, and its job is to cut up other proteins.
Hold on. Cutting up proteins. Why would it need to do that?
Because sometimes proteins need a little snip here and there to become fully activated.
So it's like a tailor, giving these proteins a final fitting.
A perfect analogy, it's like cutting the tag off a new shirt before you can wear it, you know?
Okay, makes sense. So which proteins are getting this special treatment from caspase-1?
The proteins caspase-1 targets are called pro-inflammatory cytokines.
Cytokines, those are like the messengers of the immune system, right?
You got it.
But what are these specific ones? What are their names?
Specifically, caspase-1 is going after IL-1 and IL-18.
Okay, so those are our VIPs.
You could say that.
What kind of messages are these cytokines carrying?
Well, think of them like distress signals.
Distress signals.
Yeah, when caspase-1 cuts them, it activates them, and they rush off to alert the rest of the immune system that there's trouble brewing.
So it's like sending out a bat signal,
Mhm.
calling in the immune system's reinforcements.
Exactly.
And those reinforcements, that's what we know as inflammation, right?
I got it.
Inflammation. I have to admit, I always think of that as a bad thing.
I get it. People usually associate it with pain and swelling.
Yeah, exactly, like a sprained ankle.
Sure, but it's important to remember that inflammation is actually a crucial part of our body's defense system.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So it's not always the enemy.
No, not at all. When it's controlled and targeted, inflammation helps fight off infections, clears out damaged cells, and starts the healing process.
Huh. Okay, so it's like calling in the troops and getting the construction crews working on repairs after an injury.
Exactly, a perfect analogy.
So our bodies need inflammation to function properly.
To some extent, yes, it's like your body's way of responding to a crisis.
Okay, but you said controlled and targeted. What happens when things get out of control?
Well, that's when inflammation can become a problem.
Right, like too much of a good thing can be a bad thing.
Exactly, just like you wouldn't want a construction crew tearing down your entire house to fix a leaky faucet.
That would be a disaster.
You don't want inflammation going overboard and causing more damage than good.
So how do our bodies prevent that? I mean, it sounds like these inflammasomes are pretty powerful.
They are, which is why our bodies have ways to keep them in check.
Checks and balances, I like it.
It's all about balance, right?
Right, so spill the beans. How do we keep these tiny alarm systems from going haywire?
One of the most important mechanisms is something called autophagy.
Autophagy, what's that?
Think of it like this. Your cells have tiny recycling centers.
Recycling centers inside our cells.
Yep, autophagy is the process of breaking down old or damaged cell parts.
So it's like taking out the trash.
Exactly.
And that includes inflammasome components.
Exactly. It helps prevent them from overreacting.
Wow, so our cells are basically cleaning house to keep things under control.
Yep, it's all about keeping things tidy and preventing clutter.
Hmm, that makes a lot of sense. Any other tricks our body has up its sleeve?
Ah, there are a few more.
Leg on me?
Another one is what we call post-translational modification.
Post-translational modification. Wow, that sounds complicated.
It's not as bad as it sounds, I promise.
Okay, I'm all ears. Break it down for me.
All right, so imagine you have a basic outfit, a plain white t-shirt, and jeans.
Okay, got the visual.
You can change the whole look and function of that outfit just by adding a few accessories, right?
Sure, like a blazer to make it more formal,
Right.
or a scarf to make it more stylish.
Exactly, and that's kind of what post-translational modification is like, but for proteins.
Okay, so the inflammasome proteins are our basic outfit.
Yep, and post-translational modification is like adding or removing those accessories, but in this case, the accessories are tiny molecules that can attach to the proteins.
And these molecular accessories change how the inflammasomes work.
You got it. Some modifications can activate inflammasomes while others can deactivate them.
So it's like flipping a switch to turn them on or off as needed.
Exactly. Very precise control.
Our bodies are seriously impressive.
They really are. And we're not done yet. There's one more important player in this whole regulation system.
All right, I'm intrigued. Who's the last member of our regulatory team?
The anti-inflammatory cytokines.
Anti-inflammatory. So these are the opposite of those distress signals we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. They're like the all-clear signal, telling the immune system to stand down once the threat is under control.
Okay, so it's all about balance, right? Inflammation when we need it, but then dialing it back down when the danger is past.
You got it. The immune system has its own set of checks and balances to make sure things don't get out of hand.
So we've got autophagy cleaning house, post-translational modification flipping switches, and anti-inflammatory cytokines calling off the troops. It's amazing how all of this is happening inside us right now without us even realizing it.
It really is remarkable.
But I have to ask, what happens when these control systems go wrong?
Ah, that's the million-dollar question, and a perfect segue into part 3, where we'll uncover what happens when inflammasomes go rogue.
Oh, I can't wait. We're getting into the dark side of inflammasomes now.
Exactly. It's about to get really interesting.
All right, everyone, make sure you join us for the final part of our deep dive, where we explore the link between inflammasomes and disease.
You won't want to miss it.
All right, welcome back to our final part of this inflammasome deep dive.
Final chapter.
So far, we've learned how these cellular security guards work, how they detect threats, kickstart inflammation, and how our bodies keep them in check.
It's quite the balancing act.
Right, but as with anything in biology,
Things can go wrong.
definitely not a perfect system.
And when inflammasomes go haywire, well, that's when we see them linked to a whole range of diseases.
Okay, so now we're getting to the dark side of inflammasomes.
Exactly. You see, inflammation is kind of like a double-edged sword.
How so?
It's crucial for fighting infections, healing injuries, all that good stuff.
Right, we talked about that.
But when it becomes chronic, uncontrolled, it can actually backfire.
So instead of being helpful, it starts causing harm.
Precisely. And those little inflammasomes, they can play a big role in that process.
I see. So let's talk specifics. What kind of diseases are we talking about here?
Well, one major category is autoimmune disorders.
Autoimmune disorders, those are where the immune system attacks the body itself, right?
That's right, kind of like friendly fire.
So in these cases, the inflammasomes are basically sounding the alarm when there are no real threat.
You could say that, yeah, they're overreacting, triggering an inflammatory response that ends up damaging healthy tissues.
So what are some examples of autoimmune disorders that are linked to this inflammasome dysfunction?
Well, there are quite a few, but some big ones are rheumatoid arthritis,
Okay.
where the immune system attacks the joints,
Right.
and inflammatory bowel disease, which affects the digestive system.
Wow, so those painful symptoms are actually caused by the body attacking itself. That's crazy.
It is, and it really highlights how important it is to regulate that inflammatory response.
Absolutely, but autoimmune disorders are just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Right. Inflammasomes have also been linked to metabolic diseases.
Metabolic diseases. I wouldn't immediately connect those to the immune system.
It might seem surprising, but research is showing that chronic inflammation, even low-grade inflammation, plays a significant role in things like type 2 diabetes and obesity.
Really? So out-of-control inflammasomes could be contributing to those conditions too.
That's what the research suggests, yeah.
It's amazing how these tiny things can have such a widespread impact.
It is, and it gets even more interesting when you consider the link between inflammasomes and neurodegenerative diseases.
Neurodegenerative diseases, you mean like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Exactly. There's evidence suggesting that chronic inflammation in the brain can contribute to the damage and loss of brain cells that we see in those conditions.
So even our brains aren't safe from these inflammasomes gone rogue.
Unfortunately not, which just goes to show how far-reaching their impact can be.
That's pretty mind-blowing. But with all this knowledge, is there anything we can do about it? Like, could this lead to new treatments for these diseases?
That's the big question, and it's something scientists are actively working on.
So there's hope for the future.
Absolutely. Imagine if we could develop drugs that target specific inflammasomes, either ramping them up to fight infections or calming them down to treat inflammatory conditions.
That would be incredible, like having a fine-tuned control panel for our immune system.
Exactly. And while we're not quite there yet, the research is moving fast.
Well, I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on
Yes,
this.
me too. It's an exciting field.
So we've gone from not even knowing what inflammasomes are to understanding how they work, what can go wrong, and even potential future therapies.
It's been quite the journey.
It really has, all thanks to that one article from Assay Genie.
Right. Just shows you what a little curiosity can lead to.
Absolutely. Well, to our listener, I hope this deep dive has sparked your own curiosity about these tiny but mighty players in our immune system.
Keep learning, keep asking questions, because the more we understand about how our bodies work, the better we can take care of ourselves.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of inflammasomes.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.